Just tell me the truth!
Amara, please, just step away from the ledge.
You destroyed everything!
He buried her 3 years ago. He mourned her like a man mourns a war he lost. So when a stranger with her mother's exact smile climbed onto his casino roof, holding a dead woman's ring, Kang Min-jae realized the only thing more dangerous than losing Amara Okafor was finding her twice. If you believe the people who bury the truth to protect themselves, even the ones with good intentions, always end up hurting the ones they love most, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Comment below, should Amara have told the truth years ago? Only the secret keepers and manipulators will scroll past this one. The thing about grief, Kang Min-jae had learned, is that it doesn't kill you. It just moves into your house, eats your food, and refuses to pay rent. He'd built an empire to keep himself too busy to notice the tenant. 3 casinos, half a shipping port, a reputation so heavy that grown men rearranged their schedules around avoiding eye contact with him. And still, at 2 in the morning, grief sat at the foot of his bed like an old debt collector, tapping its foot, waiting. Tonight, though, grief had competition. Tonight, grief had a face. "Get down from there," Min-jae said, and hated how unsteady his own voice sounded, because Kang Min-jae's voice did not do unsteady. Not for police raids, not for rival syndicates with guns and grudges, not even for his own father, who once told him love was a rounding error and meant it as a compliment. The woman on the ledge of his rooftop did not get down. She held a small gold ring between 2 fingers, dangling it over 11 stories of Seoul nightlife, like it was a coin she hadn't decided whether to spend. "You knew," she said. Not a question. An accusation, sharpened on something personal. "You knew my mother. You knew this ring." Min-jae's chest did something it hadn't done in 3 years. It remembered how to hurt. Because he did know that ring. He'd chosen it himself, in a jewelry shop that smelled like his mother's perfume. Back when he still believed a man like him was allowed nice things, he'd slid it onto Amara Okafor's finger and asked her to disappear with him at dawn, the only heist he'd ever planned that had nothing to do with money. She'd disappeared, all right, just not with him. "Where did you get that?" Min-jae said, stepping closer, palms open. The universal gesture for "I am not currently planning to throw you off a building," though the night had barely started and he wasn't ruling anything out. "My father's safe," the woman snapped, "next to photographs of me, taken over years, my birthdays, my graduation, my apartment building. You've been watching me my whole life, and I want to know why, before I decide whether to drop this ring in the Han River or drop myself in after it." Min-jae's mind, usually a calculator running 6 moves ahead, stalled completely. "I don't know you," he said, and it was infuriatingly the truth. "My name is Amara Okafor," she said like a verdict. "My mother's name was Amara." Was. Past tense. A small word doing an enormous amount of damage. Min-jae had spent 3 years building a wall around one fact. Amara Okafor had vanished the morning they were supposed to run, leaving 4 words and a silence he'd never been able to bribe, threaten, or grieve his way through. He had assumed, the way broken men assume things to survive them, that wherever she'd gone, she was at least breathing. Now her daughter stood on his roof holding proof that Min-jae had spent years quietly watching a life he didn't know existed, because someone had been watching. Just not him. "I never followed you," he said carefully. "I never took those photographs." "Then who did?" Before Min-jae could answer, before he could even begin constructing a lie soft enough to survive the next 30 seconds, the rooftop door slammed open, and casino security spilled out with the barely contained panic of men who just watched their boss's tragic backstory grow legs and start live streaming itself to 300 phones on the casino floor below. Because Amara wasn't just talking. She'd been talking loud, and Seoul's nightlife had a phone in every pocket and no restraint whatsoever. "Sir," his head of security said, breathless, "you need to see the lobby." Min-jae didn't move. Couldn't. Not with Amara's eyes. Amara's eyes, in a younger, angrier face, locked onto his like she could see straight through the ledger he'd built his whole personality around. "Show me," he said finally, though some ruined, hopeful part of him already suspected what waited downstairs would matter far more than any camera footage. He was right. Because at that exact moment, walking through his casino's front doors like a woman returning from a business trip rather than the dead, was Amara Okafor. 3 years buried, very much alive, and heading straight for the elevator marked roof. Amara Okafor moved through Kang Min-jae's casino like she still owned a piece of it, which, technically, emotionally, in every way that mattered, she did. 3 years. 3 years he'd stared at a coffin he wasn't allowed to open, at a funeral he wasn't invited to but attended anyway, standing at the back in sunglasses like a man who'd learned nothing from every drama he used to mock his lieutenants for watching. 3 years of grief eating his food and refusing to leave. And here she was, in a cream trench coat, walking past a blackjack table like she was late for brunch. Edais. Her name came out of him wrong. Too soft for a man who negotiated hostage releases without blinking. Too loud for a casino floor that had already smelled blood in the water and was now filming everything with the gleeful dedication of people who understood they were about to become famous for someone else's worst night. She turned, and for one suspended second, the years fell off both of them, and they were just two people who used to build something structurally sound out of lives that weren't supposed to intersect. Then Amara arrived at the top of the escalator, saw her dead mother standing very much alive in a designer coat, and the moment shattered like a wine glass at a wedding nobody wanted to attend. Mom? Adaizi's face did something complicated, relief and guilt wrestling for control of the same set of features. Amara, baby, I can explain. You're dead, Amara said, in the tone of someone reading a receipt that didn't match what they'd ordered. I had a funeral. I gave a eulogy. I said nice things about you in front of people, Mom, and some of those things weren't even true. And now you're standing here in heels. I faked it, Adai said, because apparently there was no gentle on-ramp to that sentence, so she'd stopped looking for one. The casino floor gasped as one organism. Someone's phone caught it in perfect 4K. Adai's crossed the floor and slapped Min-jae across the face, a sharp, satisfying crack that 3 years of unresolved feelings had clearly been saving up for. Then, before he could recover, she pulled him into a hug so fierce it looked less like affection and more like she was checking whether he was real. Amara, watching her mother slap a man and then hug him in the same 6 seconds, decided the correct response was to slap him too. That's for whatever you did, she said. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm sure it's bad. Min-jae, now slapped twice in under a minute by 2 generations of the same family, had the distinct sense that his night was only getting started. It got worse. A man came barreling through the casino entrance, tie loosened, face red, security trailing behind him with the exhausted energy of men who'd already had a very full evening. Where is she? He bellowed. Adais? You told me you were visiting your sister. Who? Min-jae said slowly. Is that my husband? Adais said, wincing. Min-jae's voice cracked in a way that would have mortified him on any other night. You remarried? I faked my death, Min-jae. I wasn't going to spend the afterlife alone. The husband, a wiry, furious man named Tunde, as Min-jae would later learn, though at that moment he was simply the screaming man security was failing to restrain, pointed an accusing finger across the room. This is him? This is the Mafia man who stole you the first time? I didn't steal her, Min-jae said. She left. You watched my daughter for years, Amara snapped, ring still clenched in her fist like evidence at a trial only she'd agreed to hold. I didn't. Then who took the photographs? Adais asked quietly, and something in her voice made the whole chaotic room go still, because she wasn't asking to defend Min-jae. She was asking because she genuinely didn't know, and the not knowing scared her more than her ex-fiancé, her furious husband, and 300 live streams combined. Security finally wrestled Tunde into a manageable posture. Customers kept filming. Somewhere behind the crowd, a bodyguard was on the phone frantically instructing the casino's social media manager to do damage control on whatever this is. I don't even have words for what this is. And then, cutting through the noise like a blade through silk, Adais said the sentence that would unravel everything Min-jae thought he understood about the last 24 years of his life. Min-jae, I need to tell you why I really left. And it's not what you think. Kang Min-jae had negotiated with men who held guns to his head without so much as a raised eyebrow. He had once talked a rival syndicate leader out of torching an entire shipping container full of his product using nothing but patience and the promise of future leverage. He was, by every metric that mattered in his world, unshakable. Amara Okafor had just shaken him with 11 words. I need to tell you why I really left, and it's not what you think. The casino floor, still filming, still gasping, still treating this like the finale of a show they hadn't realized they'd been binge-watching for years, went quiet enough that Min-jae could hear the ice machine behind the bar cycling on. Not here, he said. No, Amara agreed. Not here. They moved to his private office 3 floors up, the room where Min-jae usually conducted the kind of conversations that ended careers, occasionally lives, and once, memorably, a marriage between 2 rival families that had been arranged specifically to avoid the war it ended up starting anyway. Amara followed, arms crossed, ring still clutched in her fist like she might need it as a weapon. Tunde followed too, still red-faced, still muttering about lawyers, though it was unclear which country's legal system he intended to involve. Talk? Min-jae said, once the door was closed and the noise of the casino floor had faded into something more like a distant, curious hum. Amara stood, sat again. For a woman who'd once told him his lobby looked like a wedding cake, designed by a tax auditor without blinking, she was struggling now to find a single steady sentence. I was pregnant, she said finally. The morning I left. I didn't run because I stopped loving you, Min-jae. I ran because I was carrying something So Min wanted to use against you. And I knew that the moment he found out, that baby wasn't going to be a child to him. It was going to be a lever. The room went very still. Min-jae's mind, which prided itself on running 6 moves ahead of everyone in every room he'd ever occupied, could not process a single move forward. You had my child, he said, and you left. I had children, Amara said, and the plural landed like a second slap, harder than the physical one from an hour earlier. Triplets. Nobody knew. Not even the hospital's official records. The doctor who delivered them hid it because he understood exactly what would happen if word got out that Kang Min-jae had 3 daughters walking around Seoul as targets. Amara's fist, still curled around the ring, went slack. The metal hit the floor with a small, insignificant sound that somehow filled the entire room. 3? Amara repeated. You had 3 daughters. And I'm… what exactly? Which one am I? Adesi's face crumpled in a way Min-jae had never seen. Not once in 8 months of loving her. Not even the morning he'd found her note and read it until the paper apologized for existing. You're not his, she said quietly. I need you to hear that clearly, Amara. The baby I carried that was his. I was told she died. I believed that for years. Then who? Min-jae started. I kept 1 daughter, Amara said, talking fast now, like ripping off a bandage before the fear could catch up to her courage. Raised her myself, under a new name, in a new country, and prayed distance would be enough armor. 1 daughter I placed, sold, if we're being honest. And God knows I've tried not to be honest with myself about that word for over 2 decades, with a Korean family, because I thought giving her a different life gave her a better shot at surviving one none of us chose for her. And the 3rd daughter, the one who was supposedly his, was told she died, Min-jae finished, hollow. Was told she died, Amara confirmed. Tunde, who had been quiet for exactly as long as his patience allowed, finally exploded. You're telling me I married a woman with 3 secret children and I only knew about 1? You knew about Amara, Amara snapped. I never lied to you about Amara. Then who is Amara's father? Min-jae asked, and something in his own voice frightened him. A low, dangerous calm he usually reserved for men who were about to lose considerably more than an argument. Amara looked at her daughter, then at the ring on the floor, then finally, unavoidably, at Min-jae. Her father, she said, was the man everyone believes I buried 3 months ago. The man Amara has spent her whole life mourning as dead. The office door burst open before anyone could ask the obvious question. And standing in the doorway alive was the man Amara had eulogized at a funeral that, much like her mother's, had apparently been a lie from the very beginning. Amara turned around slowly, the way people turn when part of them hopes the thing behind them will simply not be true if they take long enough to look at it. It was true. Her father, buried, mourned, eulogized in a church she'd rented flowers for on a payment plan she was still finishing. stood in the doorway of Kang Min-jae's office wearing a suit that fit better than any suit a supposedly dead man had any business owning. "Dad, I can explain," said the man, which Min-jae was beginning to suspect was simply the official opening line of every conversation in this family. "Everyone in this room keeps saying that," Min-jae said, "and so far nobody has actually explained anything. You all just keep announcing bigger secrets like it's a competition." "It kind of is," Tunde muttered, arms folded, clearly regretting every choice that had led him to a mafia boss's office at midnight to watch his wife's entire fabricated life unravel in real time. "I came here to fight for my marriage, and instead I'm watching a soap opera pilot." Amara's father, a composed, silver-haired man named Baba Adeyemi, though at this point everyone in the room had stopped being surprised by names arriving 3 scenes too late, held up a hand for patience, the universal gesture of men who need 30 more seconds to figure out how to say something unforgivable in a forgivable way. "I didn't die," he said. "I disappeared. There's a difference, though I understand tonight nobody in this family is inclined to appreciate nuance." "Why?" Amara said, and the word came out cracked, the first genuine break in a night that had otherwise been armor from start to finish. "Because I found something," Baba said. "In the hospital records. The real ones. The ones the doctor hid. The ones I wasn't supposed to have access to. But access, in my line of work, is negotiable." He looked at Ades. "You told me the baby exchange was clean. 1 for 1. A trade to protect 2 children." "It was supposed to be," Ades said. And for the first time all night, she sounded genuinely afraid. Not of Min-jae, not of Tunde's temper, but of whatever her old friend was about to say next. "There weren't 2 babies exchanged," Baba said. "There were 2 babies and a mistake. The hospital records show 3 infant girls delivered that night to 3 different women, all under assumed names, all processed through the same corrupt maternity ward. And somewhere in that chaos, the identities got tangled. Amara isn't your biological daughter, Ades." The room did not gasp this time. It simply stopped breathing altogether. "She's not," Ades repeated, testing the sentence like it might collapse under its own weight. "She's Kang Min-jae's daughter," Baba said. "The one you were told died. She didn't die. She was given to me by mistake on a night when 3 infants got shuffled between 3 desperate mothers and nobody stopped to check whose blood matched whose birth certificate." Min-jae's hand found the edge of his desk and gripped it the way a drowning man grips driftwood. "And your biological daughter?" Baba continued, turning gently to Ades. "The one you believe you kept and raised yourself in another country under a new name. I'm sorry, Ades. I've spent years quietly tracing this. She isn't yours either. She was placed that same night with the Korean family. The daughter you've called your own for over 2 decades is not the child you gave birth to." "Then who?" Adaiz's voice broke entirely. "Your biological daughter," Baba said, "grew up believing her name was Seo Yuna." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses on your chest and reminds you breathing, was never actually guaranteed. Amara laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound with no humor left in it. "So, I'm not my mother's daughter. I'm his." She pointed at Min-jae without looking at him. "And the woman destroying his empire, the one he's been at war with for years, she's actually my mother's real daughter?" "Yes," Baba said quietly. Min-jae sat down slowly, a man who had built an empire on always being 6 moves ahead, now realizing he hadn't even known which board they were playing on. "There's one more thing," Baba said, and something in his tone made everyone brace instinctively, the way a body braces for a blow it can already feel coming. "I said 3 babies were delivered and tangled that night. I never said only 3 were born." Ades went white. "Baba, don't. I have to," he said. "Because she's already found out, Ades, and she's on her way here right now." "Who's on her way here?" Min-jae asked, though some tired, battered part of him already suspected he wasn't going to like the answer. The way you already know the second half of a fortune cookie is going to ruin your week before you unfold the little slip of paper. "Yuna?" Baba said. "So Yuna." The name landed in the room like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Everyone just standing there waiting to see which direction the shrapnel would fly. "She's not just my rival's daughter," Min-jae said slowly, piecing it together the way he pieced together every disaster, backward, from the wreckage. She is Seo Chulmin's daughter. She's been running his operation since he stepped back. She's the one who's been carving pieces out of my territory for the last 2 years. She's also, Baba said, with the gentle devastation of a man delivering news he'd clearly rehearsed and still couldn't make land softly, your biological daughter, Ada's, which makes her Amara's sister, and incidentally, the daughter of the man you left standing at the altar of an escape plan you never showed up for. I didn't leave him at an altar, Ada snapped, apparently more offended by the phrasing than the actual apocalypse currently unfolding around her. There was no altar. It was a car. At dawn. Very different energy. Not the point right now, Mom, Amara said, in the flat voice of a woman who has officially run out of shock to spend. Tundi, who had been quietly recalibrating his entire understanding of his marriage for the better part of an hour, raised a hand like a student requesting to be excused from a lesson he never signed up for. So let me see if I have this correctly. My wife faked her death. Her actual daughter is a mob boss. Her not actual daughter is dating the mob boss my wife's actual daughter is currently at war with. And I came here tonight to ask for a divorce conversation. You wanted a divorce? Adai's rounded on him. I wanted a calm conversation about our future, ADAs. Forgive me for not anticipating a full K-drama reunion special breaking out in a casino office at midnight. Min-jae, for the first time all evening, felt something close to sympathy for the furious husband currently competing with him for the title of most blindsided man in Seoul. How long do we have? Min-jae asked Baba, cutting through the marital spiral before it consumed all remaining oxygen in the room. Before Yuna arrives? 15 minutes, maybe less. She doesn't travel with an announcement. No, Min-jae agreed grimly. She travels with security details who enjoy shooting first. Amara, who had spent the last hour absorbing revelations at a pace that would have broken lesser women, straightened suddenly, something sharpening behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. A flicker of the same steel Min-jae had fallen for in Ada's years earlier, proof that whatever bloodline she actually belonged to, some things simply ran in this family regardless of DNA. So my sister is coming here, she said. To what? Kill you? Kill her? Kill all of us and sort out the paperwork after? I genuinely don't know, Min-jae admitted, and it cost him something to say it out loud. A man who built his entire identity on always knowing, now standing in the wreckage of a night that had systematically stripped that identity down to nothing. Yuna doesn't negotiate. She demonstrates. If she's coming here herself instead of sending someone, it means she wants everyone in this room to watch whatever she's about to do. Then we don't wait for her to arrive with the advantage, Amara said. And there it was, the steel, fully surfaced now, unmistakable. We meet her downstairs, on our terms, not hers. Min-jae looked at her, really looked, past the shock, past the ring she dropped, past the daughter of a woman he'd never stopped loving, even when he believed her dead twice over, and felt something shift in his chest that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with the terrifying, inconvenient truth that he was falling for a woman his own blood may or may not run through, in a family tree so tangled it needed its own security detail. She's not your enemy, Adi said quietly, to no one in particular, though everyone understood exactly who she meant. She's your sister, Amara. Whatever else she's become, she started as someone I failed the same way I failed you, the same way I failed all three of you. Failure or not, Baba said, moving to the window, watching the street below where a line of black cars had just turned the corner with the unhurried confidence of people who already knew they controlled the room they were walking into. She's here. Seo Yuna did not walk into rooms. She arrived in them, the way weather arrives, inevitable, indifferent to whether anyone was ready. She crossed the casino floor flanked by 4 men who moved like they'd been trained specifically to make furniture nervous, and she did not so much as glance at the wreckage of chips and abandoned drinks her sudden appearance had left in its wake. Customers who had, minutes earlier, been thrilled to film a mafia boss's unraveling love life now quietly, wisely, put their phones away. There was drama, and then there was the kind of woman you didn't film unless you'd already made peace with disappearing. She took the elevator to the top floor alone. Her security did not follow. This, Min-jae understood immediately, was not confidence. It was a message. I don't need protection from any of you. You should be asking who's protecting you from me. She stepped into the office and surveyed the room the way an auditor surveys a company that's been cooking its books. Swift, unimpressed, already 3 conclusions ahead of everyone else present. Baba Adeyemi, she said first, and her voice was a scalpel wrapped in silk. You found me 2 weeks ago and told me everything. I've had time to think. You haven't. Yuna, Adiez breathed and took 1 step forward. 1 step, the length of an entire lifetime she owed this woman and had no idea how to begin repaying. Don't. The word cracked like a whip. Yuna didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You don't get to say my name like it means something to you. You gave me away in a hospital room and let a corrupt system hand me to Sochol Min like I was inventory. I spent 24 years believing my mother didn't want me. I built an empire out of that belief, the same way she jerked her chin at Min-jae, built his out of a gun and a ledger. We are, ADAs, more alike than you'd like to admit. All your children became exactly what your absence made us. That's not fair, Amara said quietly, and Yuna's eyes moved to her for the first time. Really looked, the way you look at a mirror you didn't know existed. No, Yuna agreed. None of this is fair. You got the mother. I got the war. A pause, cold and surgical. And apparently you also got the man I've spent 2 years trying to destroy. Small world, sister. The word landed strangely in the room. Sister. Spoken with equal parts contempt and something else neither Min-jae nor Amara had a name for yet. What do you want? Min-jae said. Because he'd learned long ago that with people like Yuna, sentiment was currency you couldn't afford to spend first. I want you to choose, Yuna said simply. 2 daughters of the woman you loved, standing in the wreckage of everything she built by lying. One of us carries your blood. One of us carries her name. The scandal is already spreading. By morning, every syndicate in Seoul will know Kang Min-jae's empire is built on a foundation this unstable. You need to decide, publicly, which daughter you're protecting. Choose wrong, and I finish what my father started years ago. I take everything you have left. And if I refuse to choose, Min-jae said, then I choose for you, Yuna said. And I promise you won't like my math. Amara stepped forward before Min-jae could answer, chin lifted. The ring she dropped earlier now clutched tight in her palm again, like an anchor. You don't get to threaten a family you just found out you belong to. I don't belong to anything, Yuna said. And for the first time, something genuine cracked through the composure. Not weakness, but old, scarred grief. The kind that never fully heals, just learns to wear better suits. I belong to no one. That's what 24 years of being unwanted teaches you. The room held its breath. I refuse to choose, Min-jae said finally, quiet and absolute. The voice of a man who'd spent his whole life being told love was a rounding error and had decided tonight that he was done doing the math that way. I will marry Amara publicly, because that's who I love regardless of blood. I will protect you, Yuna, secretly if I have to, because you are still her daughter, whether you accept it or not. And I will spend whatever's left of my empire finding the person who orchestrated that hospital switch in the first place, because none of you did this to each other. Someone did this to all of you. Yuna studied him for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind her eyes. Then Adaiz, who had been silent, staring at nothing, finally spoke. A whisper that cut through the room louder than every threat that had come before it. There weren't 3 babies switched that night. Everyone turned. There were 4. For a room that had already absorbed 3 separate life-shattering revelations in under 2 hours, this one somehow still managed to steal all remaining air. 4? Min-jae repeated, like the number itself might rearrange into something less impossible if he said it slowly enough. 4, Adaze said. I never told anyone this part. Not Baba. Not you, Min-jae. I barely let myself remember it. Her hands were shaking now. The composed architect who'd once told a Mafia boss his lobby looked like a tax auditor's wedding cake completely gone, replaced by a woman finally putting down a weight she'd carried alone for 24 years. There was a 4th girl, smaller than the others. She didn't survive the night. That part was true. That part was never a lie. But before she died, the hospital staff took a photograph for records, for the family, in case anyone ever asked. She reached into her coat and produced a small, creased photograph. edges soft with age and handling, and placed it on Min-jae's desk like it was the heaviest thing she'd ever set down. Yuna moved first, looked at it longest. Something in her face, the scalpel-sharp composure she'd walked in wearing, finally, quietly, broke. "She would have been our sister," Yuna said, almost to herself. "She is your sister," Hades corrected gently. "Was. Whatever grammar grief allows." She looked between her 3 living daughters, one biological and radically changed by another man's cruelty, one raised by love and a lie, one given to her by mistake and loved anyway. And something in her seemed to finally exhale after 2.5 decades of holding her breath. I've spent years thinking I was protecting 3 lives by scattering them. I didn't understand until tonight that I wasn't protecting anyone. I was just delaying the moment all of you would have to grieve the same thing, together, instead of alone. Eunice set the photograph down with a care that contradicted everything Soul's underworld believed about her. "I came here to make you choose between us," she said to Min-jae. "I think I already know what I actually came here for." "To stop being alone?" Amara said quietly. "Not an accusation, an offering." Yuna didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. And for a woman who'd built an entire empire out of never conceding a point, that silence said more than any surrender speech could have. Tunde, who had spent the evening recalibrating his marriage in real time, finally cleared his throat. "For what it's worth," he said to ADAs, "I'm still angry. I'm still going to need several long conversations and possibly a very expensive vacation. But I'm not leaving. Dead women don't get to just walk back into casinos and expect their husbands to disappear quietly. That's not how marriage works. And frankly, it's not how dying is supposed to work either." Adaze let out a broken, disbelieving laugh, the first real one all night, and reached for his hand. Min-jae looked at Amara, really looked the way he hadn't allowed himself to since the ring first appeared over the edge of his rooftop. "I meant what I said. Blood or not, choice or not, war or peace, I'm choosing you. Publicly. Tomorrow, if you'll let me." Amara's fingers tightened around the ring. Her mother's ring. The one thing in this entire tangled family tree that had somehow stayed exactly what it always was. A promise, waiting for the right person to finally keep it. "Ask me properly," she said, "when there aren't 4 bodyguards and my resurrected mother's husband watching." "Deal," Min-jae said. And for the first time in 3 years, something that wasn't grief sat comfortably in his chest. Outside the window, Seoul's skyline glittered on, indifferent to the small, ruined, reassembling family standing 11 floors above it. Somewhere below, the syndicates would wake to rumors of a war that never happened, an empire that hadn't fractured after all, and a mafia boss who, against every rule he'd been raised on, had chosen love over leverage. Yuna picked the photograph back up before she left, tucking it carefully into her coat. The first thing she'd ever kept, simply because it was hers. "Sunday dinner," Adaze called after her, voice thick. "You're coming. All of you." Yuna paused at the door, didn't turn around, but didn't say no either. It was, Min-jae thought, the closest thing to a happy ending this particular family was ever going to get. It was, somehow, enough.